So as a leader, what we want to do is we actually want to learn how to master the subjective in ourselves and others.
Welcome to Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations. With your host, executive leadership coach and CEO of the Granger Network, Kari Granger, and me, Paul Adams, CEO of Sound Financial Group. This is episode 1 of our 4-part series on performance, Inside the Minds of Performers.
Welcome to the Leadership Impact. On this episode, we look inside the minds of performers. So what's going on inside that mind of that performer? How do we actually get access to intervening in performance, to enhancing performance? So that's what this episode is about. I'm Kari Granger, and I'm joined by Paul Adams.
So glad to have everybody with us today. And this is a topic that I have seen plague high performers. So I can't wait until we dig in.
Paul, what are you bringing to us today?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I've seen performers run into that's enormously problematic for them and how they relate to others, how they relate to situations is that they look at facts, circumstances, what they can see or what they can prove. In fact, many performers got very good or got to the level they're at by being better at assessing the situation the way they think it is. Step by step by step, better than others. But once you get to a certain level of performance, especially when you're leading a lot of people, that starts to break down and they don't know why what they're doing now isn't working because it's worked their entire career up until they got to this new level of leadership. Now, for our audience, what we want to do here on Leadership Impact is bring real life examples that we've seen where performers have in some way had the opportunity to do better, or things we've seen that have worked, or things we've seen that we could have changed a complete different direction with some of the knowledge that Kari brings to the table. So Kari, this one is one that actually happened to me. I was young, super successful. I had grown my firm originally. I was an expert individual with a few staff. At the age of 27, I was on the cover of Advisor Today magazine. I was one of the top 4 under 40 in the country. I had just written my first book, and things were going amazingly well. And along with all of that, I got recruited into a role to be the senior vice president of the second largest firm of my type in the country with 180 advisors. And I walked in with a certain set of skills that had worked really, really well for me as an expert individual. I was super rigorous on my timing. I did exactly what I said I was going to do for people. I was no nonsense in declining things that didn't lead us to positive outcomes, in my opinion. I gave people no nonsense answers when I thought that they didn't get things done they were supposed to. And I got dropped in this organization, and early on, we were picking up incredible results. But as I started to move in the way that had worked for me prior, in this very large organization, I created a near mutiny, and not from the people that you would think would be the problem. In fact, most of the advisors loved what I was bringing to the table, the people that were out attracting revenue into the firm. This is a very large financial advising firm. Those folks loved me. Believe it or not, who it was that was cutting the legs out from underneath me and creating a mutiny within the company were all of the salaried positions, all of the administrators, all of the managers were the people that what I was doing really, really upset them. And now the CEO was hearing from all of them, despite me reporting directly to him. The CEO is hearing from all of them, which then affected how satisfied he was with what I was doing in the organization, despite the financial results significantly increasing.
Yeah, very great, rich example. And it reminds me a little bit of those leaders who rise up through their expertise and they're really star performers. And what does it take to move from a star performer to a mature leader and to a leader who can make an impact with others across the organization? So, one of the things that I've seen quite a bit, Paul, is that when we focus on actions alone, we miss a really critical part of leading others, of making that leadership impact. For the most part, when we think about results, achieving results, we think, well, what's the action to take? Yeah.
Yes, totally. That is absolutely where I was at this stage of my life.
Yeah. And then we have a series of actions. And if they work well, at least once, we try to do them again, or we try to modify them slightly. But we kind of get in this loop. Here's the result, take the action. And that's where our focus is on. Where great leaders focus on is they actually go one step before that, which is what's driving the action, what's giving us the action. And in this case, I would take a look at, the actions of the people you were leading. And the actions of the people you were leading were such that the result was a mutiny.
Yes.
Or was undermining the overall organizational performance. So, what's driving their actions is actually how they're observing the whole situation, how they're observing you, how they're observing themselves, how they're observing their future in the company. So, when you as a leader neglect to impact the way in which you and the people you're leading are observing, are viewing, are relating to the situation, you're missing the point.
Yes.
So, you could go and tell your people what to do, but it's not what you say. It's their experience of what you say. It's the way they relate to what you say that actually matters. So, one of the things that you and I have out in front of us through this podcast is to begin to give our listeners an access to impacting the way that we and the people we're leading observe the situation. And what includes in the situation is oneself, others that we interact with, circumstances, and even how we see the future, like predict what's possible for us. So my suspicion is the people you were leading observed your actions such that they didn't want to participate with you, or such that they didn't see a kind of future that they wanted to participate in, or whatever was important to them wasn't getting addressed. So there was some way in which the way you interacted with them negatively shaped their view of what was possible in their role in your organization.
Absolutely. In fact, it was all three of those things that what it felt like to them was almost like I had no future with them, as if I were putting their experience in very plain language. And the first thing I got exposed to that had me at least start watching was when somebody introduced me to the idea of what they called at the time, what's the emotional wake behind you moving through the organization? I don't know that I observed it well, but I started to observe, like, what was the wake behind me as the ship called Paul Adams moved through the organization, so that I could at least look behind and go, ooh, I tipped over a dinghy.
Yeah. So for all of us who are near a paper, if we're driving, we can't do this, but for all those who are near a paper, an electronic device, or something where we can write something down, what I'd advise us to do is write down these three things. And Paul, you write these three things down, right? So observe, write down the word observe.
Yep.
Then a little line, and then action, and then the next little line and result. Now, this simple model I got from the Newfield Network, and I love this model. And I love this model because it reminds us that it begins with the way we observe. So if we want our people to be taking effective action, we need to ensure a way of observing the situation such that they're going to want to take action. Now, what impacts the way of observing? What you just brought up, our mood. So if how you're being is producing a negative mood, like cynicism or frustration or anger or confusion, and we'll talk about moods on a later podcast, coming soon, that mood itself colors the way we see.
Yes.
So it's all of this stuff, by the way, our moods, our interpretations, all these things that get relegated to the subjective, that subjective side of things, the subjective thing that through our education we discount and we try to mitigate and we try not to be bothered by. And probably especially in the financial world, it's like, I don't want to hear about these subjective experiences. That's just your perspective. Let's deal with the hard facts and data, right?
Yes. Well, and would observe also include not just observing my own mood, but observing the other people with whom I'm interacting and what I might best anticipate is their mood?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And that's really where we're going in this whole podcast series, which is to start to give us the tools and perspective needed, not to mitigate the subjective of ourselves and others, but to master it. So, as a leader, what we want to do is we actually want to learn how to master the subjective in ourselves and others. And when we can master the subjective, we can orchestrate moods, we can shape interpretations. And if you look at those three words again, if you can shape the way you and others observe, the actions that come out of that will be the natural right actions to produce a better result. Can you see that?
Absolutely. And given that we've known each other for years, Kari, something just occurred to me that is a whole new opening. You said it so fast. I don't want the audience to miss it. You said that way I heard it, I've spent my entire career mitigating the subjective because there's like the facts don't care about your feelings could have, if I had a tattoo, it could say that. And yet what I'm hearing is for these new levels of performance to break through with large groups, it's the realization that many of my practices, I have gotten much better in the subjective over the last 13 years from this incident we just talked about. And yet not realizing that I actually still have practices, actions, ways of viewing the world that are meant to mitigate the subjective, get rid of it, rather than realizing it's there and learning to surf on it and shape it. That is absolute gold.
Yeah. And I think that, Paul, just the way you said that, that's the thing for all of us to take out of this episode, which is stop mitigating the subjective and learn to master it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I think a lot is going to change just simply realizing what I'm doing that has had me trying to mitigate the subjective rather than even sit in it and understand it and be in the observation long enough to be in some other action.
Yeah. And it's an illusion we can mitigate it anyway.
as my 27-year-old self learned well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, impossible for us humans. So let's embrace it, man.
Well, and I've got to say, the CEO I was working for at the time, the thing that he said that was so amazing to me is he said, I clearly had a really great compensation package. I was making a wonderful income. We were producing great results in the enterprise, but a guy who cared enough about me to be straight with me. And he said, Paul, it won't matter how many results you produce or how big are results. It won't matter at all if I don't feel like I love coming into the office because you've made all the people who have worked for me for years miserable. And I think that may happen with top performers as they go into bigger and bigger leadership roles more often than we'd like to think, except they may not have the person that has the courage like this CEO did to me to tell me that. Instead, they're trying to mitigate the subjective of the moods of everybody else around there rather than he just took it right on the nose with me. And I remember tearing up in that meeting because I felt like I'd really hurt him.
Yeah. And I love that he cared about the people that loved coming to work with him. And then also just from a purely bottom line perspective, you know how expensive turnover is?
Oh, yeah.
Is so expensive. And you might produce results in the short term, but those people will find other jobs.
When the turnover can, some of the studies I've read can be 1 to 2 years of that person's compensation package. So that even with administrators, people making, $40,000 to $80,000 a year, 2 or 3 of those people turn over, and you just cost the organization a tremendous amount of money. If surfing, managing, creating new subjective realities could have saved all that.
Yeah, very good. So that's really what it takes to move from a star performer to a mature leader who makes an impact, is to master the subjective. And we're going to be going far into this throughout the following episodes.
Right on. Well, I've got to tell you, I think we've given people a lot to chew on, certainly a reason to tune into the next episode. I want to thank you just for me personally, Kari, what that just sussed out for me and what I think I'm going to be able to do. I can see where I've done this in my marriage, mitigating the subjective. And for those of you that got a lot out of this today, the idea of mitigating the subjective, one, do us a favor, put in a review on iTunes, send Kari a note, and all of the contact information is right in the description, and let us know how this impacted you and where you see it and what else you'd like to see on upcoming episodes. Kari, anything else you want the audience to know?
No, thank you, Paul. I think today was good.
Thank you for tuning in to Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations. Subscribe now at grangernetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And to support you in your leadership impact, we've created an exclusive worksheet on today's topic. Just text OAR to 900-900 and you'll receive the link. We also have a special offer for you. Between now and the end of 2018, you can register for any of Kari's online courses for a 50% discount with the coupon code CELEBRATE as we celebrate our launch at grangernetwork.com. Join us for our next episode on performance.